So this is just purely for
okay.
that. All right?
All right, cool. I'll be able to talk loud enough, hopefully. All right. So just one or like a few things I want to clarify. So with when people say crypto and cryptography, it gets its name from cryptography. So, all right. Anyway, so what exactly am I doing here, and how did I get involved? I was in the space about almost a year ago, and so over the past 12 months or so, I dove really, really deep into the space, into the industry. I learned as much as I could, and I almost thought it was too good to be true. I was like, there's no way that it has these capabilities. And then the more and more I learned about it, the more I realized, no, it does. And the more I even came up with ideas on how to apply it. And so then it got me thinking, well, what can I do to help other people potentially realize that? And also, in the process, what can I do to maybe help out some people along the way? And so I put together these coding classes at Park Junior High, and Tarasik, Andrew, he was actually one of our mentors, and so we taught kids how to code. And so that was one of my interests, and I got really interested into the whole blockchain, cryptocurrency industry, and like, how can I combine these two? And so I created something called a proposal that I submitted to the Dash community, and it was voted on and funded. And so let me just go into a little bit of, I guess, kind of background of what exactly is Dash and why is it different than some of the others, and why it's kind of overlooked by a lot of people. So when you're reading articles, when you're scrolling through, if you ever go on the subreddit for r/cryptocurrency, you'll see that it is oftentimes dismissed. People overlook it, people don't. A lot of times I attribute that to misunderstanding or not being able to, I guess, understand really the why and how behind it. So you'll notice that a lot of times the specific features for Dash, you might say, oh, well, this cryptocurrency does this, and this cryptocurrency does that, and this does that. And the point is that it's not something that is totally revolutionary or new. What it is something that works, and it's something that works really, really well, and they've solved a lot of the problems that cryptocurrencies are kind of just waiting to solve, or they're thinking that they can solve it with another coin. And so how Dash is a little bit different, it's a two-tiered network. So it has the proof of work model and it has a proof of stake model. And so the issue with proof of work is that it's really difficult to solve the scaling issue, meaning that it's hard to make decisions for the network, it's hard to develop for the network, and it's also hard to make it cheap for people to use. So as proof of work, if you look at Bitcoin, for example, the transaction times and the transaction fees are so high that it's not even reliable to use as a payment option. Yeah, not anymore. Exactly. But yeah, there was a time.
It's below $1 again.
It is.
Let's see if we just.
Let's see.
How's that?
Alrighty. Let's see. Check 1, 2. Check.
Here?
Check. 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 Oh well.
That's okay.
And so what Dash does is they combine the proof of work algorithm.
Hold on just a second.
And plus, there we go. Alrighty. So they use a proof of work model, and that enables, again, like that, the decentralization enables anybody to get involved. But in addition to that, and how they are able to make decisions for the network, they have a proof of stake model. And there are issues with both of these, but when you combine them, you can get them to work pretty well together. And so there are these coins called masternode coins, and so that is what Dash is. And so what that basically means is that for the miner, when the miner mines a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, they get 100% of the mining reward. Whereas in Dash, 45% of the miner's reward goes to the miner, 45% goes to processing transaction fees, and then 10% goes into something called a monthly treasury system. And so that 45% that processes transactions, that makes it so that it's so minimal, that makes it so that the transaction cost is very, very low. So you can have a transaction that's less than or around 1 or 2 cents. Additionally, that 10% that is left over goes into the development of the coin, and it also goes into proposals that community members can submit. So again, that is why I am here. I submitted an idea to the proposal system, and the 10% of the coins that were mined for that month, the community or the network basically decides what proposals to fund. And so my proposal was one of those. And how they make that decision on what proposals to fund, that is done by the proof of stake model. So they actually have, you can think of them as essentially the investors. So to have a stake into it, you have to have 1,000 Dash. And so that's like that's your incentive to make a good decision, meaning that every time somebody votes on a decision for the network, because of that essentially 1,000 Dash collateral, you're incentivized to make a decision that will help the network. And so what that means when I say when you put 1,000 Dash to stake, that doesn't mean that they take it away from you. It doesn't mean that it's locked in. You can take that out anytime. The difference is that if you have a masternode or that 1,000 Dash, you actually can process transactions, and you actually get rewarded for doing so. And so for staking your 1,000 Dash, you get essentially you get payments for processing transactions. And so how is it different than miners processing transactions? Well, with the stake model, you can basically enable InstaSend confirmations. And so instead of having the miners confirm a transaction, if you enable InstaSend on a transaction, it gets broadcasted to essentially a random group of the masternodes to instantly confirm that transaction. So why is this important? Because we now have something that is very viable as a actual payment processor. And my kind of philosophy is, why invent the same thing like a million different times? Why not have something that works really well and it does what it's intended to do? And so that is kind of my synopsis of Dash, and it's through this kind of community support that they are able to actually fund ideas. They are able to fund projects, fund integrations, fund marketing. They do the advertisements, and everything is done through the community. So anybody can just submit a proposal. And so just talking a little bit more about the proposal system, to submit an idea, it requires stake as well. So it requires 5 Dash to submit an idea to the network. And that 5 Dash is essentially, it's burned or it's destroyed, which is kind of a weird concept. But that's kind of like your stake, because if all these other people are going to read through your idea, they don't want it to be spammed. They don't want anybody just to be able to submit something. So that's kind of like what the requirement is. And so I learned about that, and I saw a lot of opportunities with that. And what's really interesting is cryptocurrency or blockchain, it eliminates that need for trust, meaning that you don't have to cross your fingers and hope that somebody will pay you back, or hope that this person will follow through. You can actually cryptographically prove that this transaction or this payment is legitimate. Now, the interesting thing is, why I'm kind of bringing this up is with Dash, I couldn't really do that. I submitted an idea, and essentially the community had to trust that I would follow through on this. So it is flawed, but in a way, it's almost like refreshing. It's like in a space where you can't trust anyone. Here, this is a community that part of their budgeting is essentially trusting people to follow through on their ideas. And so where does that bring me here today? Well, I think that partially that might be flawed, but I think that over time people can prove themselves and people can generate a track record. And so I thought, well, how can I prove this? Because part of the issue was people would submit these ideas, right? They would get funded, they'd be really, really good ideas, then all of a sudden they would disappear. And then nobody would know like where these people go. And so it wasn't very efficient, meaning that people's proposals would get funded and they wouldn't follow through. So what I did was create a plan for essentially a way to encourage people to hold themselves accountable. And I thought, well, what better approach than to potentially involve students? So then I thought to myself, well, I'm a student, I love to learn. How can I encourage other people to learn? How can I encourage them to take ownership of their own education? And so what we've created with Bit2Byte is essentially a miniature grant system for students. So we've taken abstractions or kind of parallels of what we've learned from Dash and cryptocurrencies and blockchain, and we're applying that to essentially a learning movement, meaning that by going to college, I looked around me and I realized, wow, there are a lot of people who are really smart and really devoted to their education, and there are a lot of people who are just here because their parents told them to be here. And I'm like, that is an issue. And I can't just go up to that person and say, yo, you need to own your own education. And so what we've created is essentially a student organization that funds student ideas. So we fund student projects, we fund student research, we fund events, and we fund student scholarships. And so we allow students to submit proposals to us, basically a document or this little mini grant, and we fund student projects, and what we get in return is essentially documentation, or we get them to ask themselves what they learned and why they did it. So we allow students to share their ideas, help make them a reality, and then connect them to a network of mentors, a network of teachers and other students. So you're like, well, how do you build a revenue model off of that if you're just giving out funds? And so with that, we do different things to kind of counteract this idea of just giving out grants to students. So what we ask for students to do for us is, if they're doing a project, we want them to document their process. We want them to explain or reflect on what worked, what didn't work. We then ask them to create a mini curriculum or a presentation that they upload to our platform. And we then use this as essentially a curriculum or many little mini lessons that other students can learn from. So by funding one student's idea or one student's project, we can then enable them to publicize, share their results, and then another student across the world can learn from it. And we do that with all of our other budget categories. So with events, with scholarships, a scholarship format that we're doing, we're actually enabling students to submit a monthly report about their learning, about their education, about what they're doing to grow as a student or as a professional. And they compile essentially a report of what they're doing to learn, and then we give out scholarships on like a monthly basis. So instead of just the old way of thinking of scholarships, I run a company and I'm going to give out $10,000 to this student because he wrote this essay. Well, that might look good for me, the company, but for that student, how do I know that they're going to follow through on their education? How do I know if they're even going to use it for their education? So what we've created is an incentive to hold the student accountable for their own development. And so by combining that with cryptocurrency and with blockchain, now we can create essentially a public ledger of all of the projects, events, the scholarships, the grants, the research that we fund, and it's open to the community. The community can see it, students can see it, they can learn from it, they can grow, they can iterate off of it, they can refine other students' ideas, and I guess in summation, what it creates is a network or community of students that encourages them or incentivizes them to learn, but to also help others learn. And so, again, it's all these abstractions from cryptocurrency into the educational space. And so now that we have blockchain, if somebody wants to make a donation, to our organization, they could actually track their $10 donation and see what student project they fund, or they can see what student they're enabling to go to college. And so they can see that. And so it's very transparent. And so that's kind of our model. And so what we are doing now is we are working with students across the U.S., trying to get them to collaborate, work together, share projects, and we're trying to streamline as much as we can. So if a student has an event, we get them to create an event template so that 6 other universities across the United States can then take that event and apply it. Same with a project, same with a workshop. We do educational blockchain events, and we try to create essentially templates or we try to streamline it so that other students can learn from it and try it out for themselves. So just to reiterate, it's about making the same way that cryptocurrency makes the individual user their own bank, making them own their own, be in charge of essentially their own, being their own bank, we are making the student become their own teacher and become other people's teachers. And so in owning their own education. So that's kind of some of the parallels that we are trying out. And we've seen a ton of success so far, and we've been getting a huge amount of interest from students across the United States. We've been getting just a ton of support to make this a reality, because the fact of the matter is, it will help a lot of people along the way, and we now have a technology that allows us to show that help, to tangibly show the effects that we're having, the impacts that one college kid maybe is having on a student that he mentors or teaches. And then you can visualize and see the impacts that those students are having on other students across the world. And so it's, at the heart of it, it's decentralized learning. So I guess without going into too much of the nitty-gritty details, because I could talk for hours and hours, is there any huge major questions that you guys have? Yeah.
And I'm sorry if I missed this, but what's the incentive for the individual proposing to follow through and complete?
So basically, it's their track record or if they're submitting it under their name, it's their, meaning that if they don't follow through, there's a very high likelihood that they won't get funded for next time. And so the point is that we can't guarantee that, right? That's an issue. We can't guarantee that 100% of the students will follow through on what they promised. But what we can do is over time, we can reward the people who do follow through and encourage the people to, and also, it's about limiting our risk too. So if a student has done X number of events and they've submitted X number of projects and they have attended or hosted a certain number of workshops, we can make an analysis of the work that they've done in the past and make a prediction on what they might complete. And another way of doing that, I guess, more concretely, is by making it so that the funds that we give out, it's not just a one and done, good luck, I hope that you follow through or you accomplish your goal. We actually break it up into different milestones, and so we require different deliverables over time so that it's essentially we are limiting our risk in that student not being able to follow through, provided with the incentives of encouraging them to follow through. So there is no simple answer to that question, and I guess the answer is refinement and efficiency over time. Yeah.
Since you're using the technology, why not a coin reward system?
Yep, and so we've been thinking about that. So he's been talking about kind of like a corn reward system or like maybe a referral system in. Exactly, and so that is going to be one of the things that we move into is now that it spreads like wildfire. Like the idea itself, when students learn about that, they want to get involved, and so we are researching ways to, I guess, kind of incentivize the. I guess the sharing of it, or to get people involved, or maybe somebody submitting their first project or something. Maybe they do get a little bonus or something. But the point is that we don't even really need that because there is so much interest, and it is like blockchain is the word on on campuses across the United States, and so by combining this movement with students' ability to kind of learn and take their own education into their own hands, it's a really good parallel because the two kind of complement each other. So that's kind of our angle. Yeah.
So I'm curious about the barometer or flavor of young students today for the desire to be entrepreneurial and profitable in spirit. So can you give me a little bit of feeling of what's going on in your youth right now?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have to say I feel bad for the students who don't have that mentality, just because I see a future in which we will be receiving opportunities and jobs based on our track record, based on our history, based on our projects, based on our impacts that we've had on the people around us. It's moving, and I know nobody likes to hear it, but it's moving less and less away from a piece of paper that says you're the standard of everybody else at this university. And I know nobody likes to hear that, but the point is that now we have something like cryptocurrency or blockchain that can cryptographically prove track records. And so by enabling students to get an early start in that, by enabling them to build up their portfolio of experiences, their portfolio of opportunities, projects, things that they've created, they can use that as essentially their own personalized, resume, and they can get paid to build it up over time too. So it's making your education your occupation, because I also don't think that anybody should stop learning at any point either. And so by combining the application of knowledge plus the incentivization to obtain knowledge, it creates this kind of perfect synergy that I guess can only be explained by the effects that they have. Like, I can't even put that into words, but again, it's like this learning movement that is combined with a technology that can now make it happen and make it a reality.
There's room for them to be helped in understanding what investing in their own life and in their own. So you're telling me they're stunted. A lot of the young people today might be stunted, perhaps, and there's opportunities for maybe people that like us that are entrepreneurial to help young people start to get a better understanding for if you invest in your technology. Yourself. Would you say that that is true?
Exactly. So by essentially investing in what we are doing, we're telling students you are investing in yourself, because, and actually that is our model. If the student can prove that they're growing, they're learning over time, they're delivering, if they're investing in themselves, we want to reward that. And so to answer your question about, well, not everyone's an entrepreneur. No, right now everyone is not. But I personally feel that that mentality or that way of thinking about, about creating something, about, going out there and doing something that nobody asked you to do, that is where the world is moving. With technology, with globalization, we're only going to see this increase even more and more. And so this is a way to not only teach people that this is a really powerful concept, that their own education, their own development is for their own benefit too, but it's also to show them that it's really good for a lot of other people. They can see the effects that it's having on students, on the problems that are being solved, the things that are being made happen, the donations that are being made to communities that are being that are funding research. So they will be able to see it. There is no way that I can, sit someone down and say, you need to become an entrepreneur, or you need to go out and create something or do something. No, I'm going to prove it to them. We're going to prove it to them by creating a platform that shows them thousands or millions of other students doing that. And so it's that proof of work model applied, or proof of exactly. It's a proof of knowledge and education model combined with proof of work, or their ability to follow through and produce something, create something tangible that can inspire other people. And the other part of this is not something that will be for profit either. I know you're thinking, well, how are you able to scale? How can you build something that's renewable if it's not going to be on a for-profit model? Well, the point is that we're going to essentially encourage students to help and teach others, be rewarded by that, and then basically offer that as that's their incentive. That's what we want their incentive to be. It shouldn't, right now, it's, yes, I can get a scholarship for $1,000 per month, but in the future, we want to slowly over time teach the students that their incentive should be, their own growth, their own development, and their own ability to help others around them. Yeah, Philip.
What can I buy with Dash?
All right, yeah, so sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent. So with Dash, and if you go to discoverdash.com, you can see thousands of merchants and stores across the U.S. that are accepting it. And again, the point is that it works really, really well. And there are a lot of I can't talk about all of them, but there are a lot of integrations that people don't even know are happening, that are happening behind the scenes. Integrations with payment processors, existing payment infrastructure that they're doing, that I think people will kind of wake up over time and realize this is a thing now. And so it's their model for essentially their marketing is develop it, create the features, create the community, make it work, and it will market itself, essentially. And so you see that they don't do these, they don't hype a lot. They don't, we actually, we sponsored the BTC Miami conference. And so one thing that I noticed was just all across the board, all of these, I call them hype tants, or like, just people trying to, I don't know, like reinvent, I don't know, the next wheel or something. And the more and more I realize, why do that when you have something that is working, and that you can create something called DAPIs, or decentralized APIs. So it's a little bit different than dApps. So that's just decentralized apps. And so you see that used a lot with Ethereum. But what essentially Dash is doing, it's that combination of a scalable model that's working, plus they're going to offer decentralized, instead of apps, decentralized APIs or interfaces, so that it can use the existing infrastructure that Dash has created through this two-tier network, so that you can have a DAPI on the network that you don't have to wait, minutes and minutes, or potentially hours for confirmation times. So that's kind of my personal thinking on why it has a lot of potential to do really well. And at the end of the day, it's almost like, are we expecting all of these merchants or all these online stores to accept like 60 different cryptocurrencies, or I don't know. So we're kind of bit to byte, or what we are doing, we kind of took that approach. And if we create something that is working for students, and it is helping students share ideas and develop solutions to problems, that's all the the marketing that we need. We don't need to reinvent the next the next like coin or anything. We can create our platform around the existing infrastructure. Yeah. So that's a little bit about what I'm doing, and I guess one more thing I want to say is this all kind of started with, again, like this it's been this like progressional thing for me. And so as we increased our funding, the more and more I realized the funding that we received, this was bigger than any one individual or even just our idea. Meaning that I wanted to make what we were doing so much more impactful and scalable and affect so many more students. And so I spent like 2 or 3 months just working with my team. I'm actually at Iowa State University, and we just prototyped and developed all of these essentially this entire model. And so now we're at a point in which we want to get help. So we want to involve students, we want to involve professionals, and we want to encourage them to submit proposals for projects, for funding, for all of that. So anyway, our next kind of phases or steps is going to be essentially building up that track record. So building up that track record of things that we funded, student projects and all of that, and so that we can use that as our example or as our, as our history. And then that in return opens up new possibilities, because now a student can look back and they can see what we've done, or a donor or a company can look back and they can see it, all of the impacts that we've had, and that's their incentive for helping us.
All right.
All right.
Let's hear it for August.
Thank you.
Thanks, August.